Okay, more testing information.
Testing results, yes.
Mrs.
Now that we're-
Ellsworth with the Wisconsin State Assessment System news.
Yes, okay. I have the reports that would really kind of lead up to what David has reported on, which ultimately would be the ACT at the high school. We did get our the results were released on April 8th for the WKC. Embedded are 2 documents. One of them is a comparison report, just talks about our WKC scores for this year. The chart that you have...
Do you want me to put that up?
Yeah, if you could, that would be great. This particular chart is familiar to you. I think it's the way that we've reported out in the past. I did include 2012 scores and then put in next to them the 2013 scores. The AMO, or the measurable objective that we were trying to reach this year, did go up from last year. So in reading, we were looking at a target of 42.7. It was 40% last year, and then 56% for math. So they've raised the bar for what the target was. Also, you'll notice there's a column, and it's in white. There's Wisconsin all. The in white is actually what the state average turned out to be. The first column was for reading, and the end column was the state average at each grade level for math. Now, the chart can be slightly confusing in that the first 6 boxes, you have the elementary schools broken into their individual schools. What we're really probably interested in at the district level is at the bottom you'll see a box called combined schools. That really is taking all of the schools into account, all of the 3rd grades across the district, all of the 4th grades, and all of the 5th grade scores. And so if we want to just go down and focus on that, you'll see that we go to the combined schools scores. If you compare the 3rd grade as a district, what we did last year, we've increased this year. Of course, you have to remember these are 2 different classes then. The 3rd grade last year is not the same grade that was tested this year in 3rd grade. But we went from 32% last year to 36%. And then in math, it went from 37 to 49. So we saw increases there. In 4th grade, once again, everywhere that there's a light green box, it indicates that from last year's score to this year's score, there was an increase. Significant to note that last year's 4th grade tested 19%. This year we had 34% of them being proficient or advanced in reading. For math, we went from 34.6 to 43%. And 5th grade, you'll notice that was also an increase in both reading and math. If you go up 2 boxes, sorry, this was not done in order. Benefit of hindsight, I would have put them in a little different order. If you go to TMS, we'll go to our middle school scores. In 6th grade, you'll notice that nice increase in the 6th grade class actually met the reading target for the state, or surpassed it. So that was very good. And then in math, we have an increase from 29 to 35%. We did see our 7th and 8th grade scores did go down from what the test scores were last year to this year. And then when we look at our 10th grade, they also increased then, and 42.5 at the high school, so they nearly made the reading target. Our stronger scores did show up in some of the reading areas. Probably more important is if we would go ahead and look at the second report, which looks like this. I have to thank my predecessor for doing a wonderful job on charts. Sorry, Cindy, if you could open that up. This is a is it in there?
It is. I just
Okay. This is a longitudinal look at the classes. The first one that you see is for juniors. They didn't take a WKCE, but I think you got a wealth of information on the ACT scores, and you know where we're at as a district on those. If you go to the sophomore class, they did take the WKCE this year. You'll notice probably what we're really interested in is a trend line. And the blue line graph actually indicates our reading scores, and if you follow that, we see a positive trend line for the sophomore class in reading. And you'll note we have a negative trend line, although it did go up at the end for math. It does support the identification. We've been concerned about the math program. We've, since identifying the problem, have put through the Think Through Math, have looked at the math program. We have a new math curriculum in place now. So if you go from the sophomore, freshman did not test this year. If you go to 8th grade, looking at the 2 trend lines, you'll see that we have the slightly positive trend line for reading, but we see, once again, a negative trend line for math. But there was an increase at the end, which we went from 28.5 to 35% of the students being advanced or proficient in math. 7th grade, the trend continues. It's positive for reading. We do see the negative trend line for math. And 6th grade, you'll notice that in 6th grade, they were above the average of 37% for reading. They were above the average in reading this year, following that positive trend line for reading. Strong increase from last year, if you'll notice, in 6th grade, from what they did as 5th grade to what they did as 6th grade students in reading. And then, I know yours aren't taped together the way mine are, sorry, probably not in a good order. Going to the 5th grade class, their trend lines are very flat. So they had a bounce back and an increase in reading from last year and an increase in math. But our math score is fairly strong at 40% of our students. Then you go to 4th grade, you'll see a positive trend line from 3rd to 4th grade for both reading and math. They were just below the state average of 36. They scored 34% of our students were advanced and proficient. And if you look at our math score, we were just below the state average of 51%, came in at 43. The positive trend lines for reading do show that leads into what Mr. Hay or David was talking about as far as having stronger, probably, English scores when we get to the ACT in high school. If you look at the 3rd grade score, well, this did work out for the best for last, so we can end on a positive note. If you look at this, these are the strongest scores we've had in reading and math for a class, and then I look back over a decade. So these are the strongest, this is the strongest start that we've had. We were above the state average for 3rd grade. They scored at 36.6. They were above the state average in reading, and the state average was 50. We were at 49.4 for math scores. So this is the strongest start we've had a class perform at for the WKC results. This is also the first year that this would be a class that's had the math program since its inception for math expressions. So we're hopeful that we'll continue to see a positive trend in the area of math, and we're seeing some of the positive changes in reading. So those are our results. These are all taken from the WISE portal. That's what Mrs. Zardy was referring to. They have a public portal on the front page of the DPI website, and we can go to that and you can find information. Also on there's an opportunity that you can make some comparisons to other school districts. It's a very interactive tool, so we could compare our school to several others. And I did make quite a few comparisons, but that's something we can do when you have an opportunity to be on the computer and work through it, because it's kind of limitless what you can compare.
So again, these trend lines and the percentages that we see at the bottom for the individual years, those reflect proficient and advanced, right?
Correct. Yes.
But how do we factor in, do the trend lines, is it complicated by the fact that the WKCE scoring was changed over time? I mean, is there any solace in a negative trend line because the score was changed or not?
They did what they called it NAPizing the score.
Yes.
So what they did was converted it over. I don't know if we can take solace in it.
Yeah, not solace. That's probably not a good word. I'm just trying to. Does that have to be factored into the trend line?
And probably sure. The last 2 years. If you look at the last 2 years, that's really when they went with this new scoring system and those last 2 tests we've taken. So if you want to look at the last 2, we've made some gains. So if we used a really short trend line and looked at the most recent tests. But they say that they've converted it to the NAEP scores, and they've done those conversions, and that it's what they're following.
Was it 211, 212 when we NAEPized, so that...
Would it be 3 years of scores?
15?
I thought it was 212, 213.
Okay, so when you see all of the scores go down that year, it's because they set the bar at a higher level.
They convert, and the scores
so-
have been progressively going up. By 2016-17, we'll be at the target of 50% for reading and 65% for math, and that's the target they want to get us to. Next year, we'll be changing the tool to assess with. We'll be going to the Smarter Balanced Assessment, So not only will the high school be giving ACT Aspire and the ACT, they'll be giving a work keys assessment, and that'll address the career readiness piece, and that'll be given to the juniors as well. The day after the ACT is given, they'll be taking the work keys assessment.
It's just between changing like the NAPIs, changing the actual standard, and then changing actual tests from WKCE to Smarter Balance. It's hard to keep a sense of progress.
And it will be very different for next year because it'll be an assessment that's given in the spring. It'll be given at the very end of the school year.
Okay.
And that would be in our favor. Yes.
Yeah. Stay tuned. What David said.
Okay.
So we've started some programs on the lower levels on reading and math. And right here, the 3rd grade and 4th grade scores are showing the improvement related to those programs we started. Whereas the older students, the older grades, have not gone through those programs we implemented to
From the beginning,
be
right.
part of this fix of.
Well, I don't know that we have enough information to definitively conclude
No,
that, but
we're hopeful.
We're hopeful
that
there's a
this is
correlation there.
that's
Yeah.
part of the reason that we're seeing some
Yeah.
stronger scores at the 3rd grade.
yeah.
Even the 4K program. I mean, besides daily 5 or math expressions, you know, the 4K program, all day kindergarten, those types of things as well. Because after these come out, I do get parents or people telling me, you know, we don't have a good report card. And I just want to emphasize there are programs in place, but they're not, we put programs in place.
Right.
But it's not instantly,
There's not an instant response.
right.
No.
It has to go through a number of years to see some kind of results.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. We wish it were instant.
And we're not just waiting for these kids to go all the way through.
No.
We've got things going on at the high school.
Right.
The math lads, we're doing that
Right.
at the middle school now. And so
Right.
we're trying to help those students that are past that point to help them increase their scores too. And so hopefully some of those, the math labs will show in testing down the road too, that will help boost the math scores.
Yes, I would agree.
Our teachers are working harder than they've ever worked, you know, constantly assessing where kids are at, providing interventions. I mean, they're working very hard. I think it's important to emphasize again that it's an effort that everyone needs to be involved in. Like we saw tonight with the parents who were supporting their kids with reading at home with Battle of the Books. We need that involvement as well to really see big gains in our test scores. It can't be the school alone trying to change some of the dynamics that also have an impact on student learning.
One of the most important things that parents can do is read to their child from the moment they're born, and even before, if they want to.
Every day.
Read to them every day, and then when they start learning to read, let them read to you. That has to be emphasized. The parents need to be
It is, yeah.
part of that whole process.
And we have several things going on to support that. Even for over the summer, the middle school's looking at they've applied for a grant recently to supply students with summer reading material that will be relevant and of interest and frequently delivered to their door. Several of the elementary buildings open themselves up to having people come in and get new books over the summer. There are the little red libraries that you see around town. It really is, it's a concerted effort to address that. Oh, any other questions?
We'll let you off easy for now.
School report card is coming up probably in August, so I'm sure there'll be more questions then.
Yes.
All
Right.
right.
But
Thanks,
I
Patty.
think we're hopeful that our report cards will be good.
We're
Because
hoping
we saw, you know.
some increases, so
Yeah.
we're hoping. And a lot of that is a 3-year average. And also, the scores are just one piece of our report card. It's attendance, it's closing those achievement gaps between some certain groups. There are several parts that make up our report card. So,
That's good.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you for the report.